All right, let's do some winners because Rick was a winner for the most part. He lost the driving bet from New York City to Stamford, Connecticut. But let's look at some winners tonight from today's action, I should say. And you know what? I'm going to go first because I'm the host. This is one of the few things I have going for me so far.
I'm just a supporting cast, and if it's going to make you feel better with all the bets that you have lost, to go first. I'm here as a self-esteem coach for you.
The world's best GM, the world's worst self-esteem coach.
What did you say when we were on the road? I would be the worst.
Oh, yes. I will say this quickly because we need to get to the winners. But I told Rick several times in our many travels together the last few months that his bedside manner is such that if he were your doctor, you're definitely jumping out the hospital window because that's better than anything you're going to get in terms of medical advice. All right, my winner, before you make more jokes about me, Will Levis to the Titans. This feels like a pretty easy one because he was certainly a loser yesterday on day one, only because he didn't get drafted. But let me ask you, how do you feel about that? Because the Titans trade up from where they were to 33, the second pick in what became the second round, and they get their quarterback. Not a great day for Malik Willis. 35-year-old Ryan Tannehill in the final year of his deal. But I think this is best-case scenario for a young man. There it is.
There we go. Number 4 tonight.
Number 4 tonight, who had so much pressure on him. Going back to when we saw him at his pro day, this feels like a great situation.
Yeah, and I know when we were at his pro day, it just seemed like everything was forced. The enthusiasm with his teammates, the throws he made, he was just wound so tight. Everything was just so bottled up in him. This is going to take a ton of pressure off him, having to come into an organization saying you're the guy, you're the savior of this organization. That's not what this is about. So he's going to have an opportunity to come in, sit, learn, work on some of the technical things that he needs to do, and then hopefully he'll go on to be the franchise quarterback of the Tennessee Titans.
Any chance, assuming everyone's fully healthy, that he wins the job in September?
I don't think they're going to force it. Like I said, the benefit of it, after going through all that anxiety last night, sitting in that green room,
right,
then I bet you that was a long flight back home from Kansas City this morning. But he got rewarded tonight being Tennessee going up and making a trade to get him.
It's funny you mentioned long flight home. Only one player remained in the green room after not getting drafted on day one, and that young man, 5, was Brian Branch, safety at Alabama. And I mentioned Brian Branch because I want to talk about the totality of the Detroit Lions draft. And your brother obviously works in the Lions organization, one of the, if not the best player in Ohio State history. And, I had a great time talking with him. He's now my new favorite Spielman. Yeah. That's a conversation for another time. But I'll let you, because you want to talk about this draft, obviously, because your relationship with your brother. But this is an absolute grand slam of a draft. And I'll just go quickly through what they did on day 2. Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, we've talked about Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin, who they traded to get the Western Kentucky defensive tackle here. And what is not to like about this in terms of how this makes this team so much better in that division?
Yeah, and even if you look what they did yesterday, and there was some criticism out there about them going to get Jahmyr Gibbs. Then they came back with Jack Campbell. Guys that are just high-quality, high-character people, but also excellent football players. And when you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, look at what he's going in the situation he's going into. Mm-hmm. They signed Montgomery from Chicago as the big back. Swift has been hurt a lot, so he has durability issues. Swift's going into the last year of his deal, so this will be a big get for the Detroit Lions because they're getting another explosive playmaker that can not only play in the slot as a receiver, but as a runner, and he can give them more than just a running back position. He brings so much more versatility to their offense, and don't forget, he has return ability as well.
And by the way, Brian Branch, by staying in Kansas City to hear his name called, gets to walk out into the stage, which some of the other players, including Will Levis, who left, did not get to do. Just something to keep in mind here. My last winner, and this isn't quite as sexy a draft as the Lions who we just talked about. The New England Patriots, as you talk about, sometimes have their own draft board, Rick, and sometimes they have the draft board that everyone else is following. This year, it was closer to everyone else's, but I still think they got so much value. First round, they traded down, got Christian Gonzalez. And then today, they get Keon White, who I had as 30th on my overall big board. The edge rusher, who is 285, you see there out of Georgia Tech, the transfer from Old Dominion. And then they came back and got Marty Mapu, a guy that we saw for the first time at the Senior Bowl. He's listed as safety, probably more likely to play linebacker, not quite as fluid as you might want in a safety at the next level. But I got Kyle Duggar vibes in that he's a small school guy who is such a good athlete and can do a lot of things. What do you think about what they did with Keon White and Marty Mapu?
Yeah, I think they took two very good football players, and Mapu, he's going to be an instant starter on special teams. Is really going to help them and what they need to accomplish there. So they got young talent, very good football players. Again, I always emphasize the high character because all those kids are great kids, and they still have such a high ceiling. They haven't reached their full potential yet.
All right, let's turn to some of Rick's winners, and let's start with a team that hit it out of the park on day one, and they came back in day two and just kept hitting home runs. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, no, I loved what Howie Roseman did. They love to go to Georgia, and when they went down, they filled yesterday their two biggest needs that they had, defensive line. And the reason they went to the Super Bowl last year, understanding the offensive firepower, understanding how Jalen Hurts played, but that defensive line and that rotation and the ability to get pressure on the quarterback, that's what got them to the Super Bowl. They couldn't keep everybody, but Howie addressed some of the needs in free agency that he could, signed some of the core veterans back that were great team leaders. Now you got a Jalen Carter who may be the best player in this draft if you hit on him overall, for sure the best defensive player. I'm sure they went and checked all the boxes they had to do with all the off-field issues and the poor pro day and everything else they had to do. So I believe they got a steal there. You got Nolan Smith, who's going to give them edge pass rush ability, a lot like Rasan Reddick does for them.
Yep.
And then they come back today and get Tyler Steen, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. He can play left tackle. He can play right tackle. We've seen that down to Senior Bowl. Some even see him as a guard. When you draft a player like this, what you're talking about in the draft room is what he can do and where he can line up. So they will look at their offensive line and say, what are the best 5 players we have up front? And when you got a player with the flexibility that Tyler Steen does, that's going to give them a lot of options up front. And finally, Sidney Brown, your guy, the guy that you really like.
Yeah.
Okay, he was a poor man's Bob Sanders to me. There's no question that he is undersized, thickly built, ran very fast at the combine. When you watch him on tape, he does a lot of man coverage. Him and the Big Ten tight ends, you got Laporta, you got Schoonmaker, all those guys. He goes and matches up with them. The thing that was most impressive to me was when we went down to the Senior Bowl and everything that he did on tape, it just elevated down there. Every time he got an opportunity to be on a big stage, All-Star game, which was the Senior Bowl, the Combine, his pro day, he just kept answering questions. And they need help at safety.
Yes.
So not only are they filling needs, but they're filling needs with very good football players.
And we talked to him at the Combine, and you came away very impressed. And I did too. And then he went out there and ran a sub 4.5. So check marks all around for Sidney Brown. All right, the next team that is one of your winners, and we're going to go to Denver. Your old right-hand man, George Payton, was with you forever at every stop, now the general manager in Denver. What did you like about their draft? Because they don't have a ton of picks.
Yeah, no, but they took advantage of the amount of picks that they had.
Yeah.
He stayed true to his board. And when you look at Marvin Mims, who I think is the best slot receiver in this year's draft, he can play some outside. He has speed. He can catch the ball. He can make plays after the catch. He's very explosive playmaker, and they do have an unbelievable receiver room. So I don't know if Russell Wilson's going to have any more excuses going forward, especially with Sean Payton as their head coach.
Right.
Drew Sanders, we talked about, another player that the defense will have, and he'll give them versatility. He's playing stack linebacker. He can also rush the passer. He's athletic enough to cover. Needs to get a little stronger in line, taking on at the point, but he does a great job. And for a guy the first time playing a stack linebacker position, he can really find the ball and shows excellent instincts. You can see him right there in coverage, which he didn't do at Alabama, but when he drops from the stack position, he had a natural feel and instinct, which is hard to find, especially at his size at 6'5". And then the last guy who I loved, everybody was thinking he was going to be a free safety. I think he's more than athletic enough to play at the corner position.
Right.
That's Riley Moss at Iowa. And he is a very instinctive corner, great ball skills, more than willing to come up and will throw his bag of bones in a pile and try to hit you. The reason why everybody thought he could be a potential free safety is because of his instincts. And when you got a corner that can hit, that is that big, and it's a weak safety class, and how smart he is and the type of instincts and savvy he plays with, that speaks safety. But I think just because of the way he plays corner, I would play him there first.
4-3 is what we saw from Mims. 4-6 is what I imagine Sanders run. 4-4 is what he's getting athletes is what we're learning, and that's what you need at times when you're in the NFL. All right, your last winner. Let's go down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They have had a ton of players drafted, both on day 1 and day 2.
How about 8 picks in the first 2 days of this draft? And 2 of the top 3 picks in this draft were from Alabama. Bryce Young, Will Anderson, and then Jahmyr Gibbs that the Detroit Lions took. So they hit it out the park from the Alabama perspective, having all those picks in the first round, I believe all in the top 10. And then you come back in the second day. Brian Branch, who we talked about, not only can play safety, he can play nickel corner, he can play outside. Very good football player. Didn't test as well as you wanted him to, but he's a better football player, and he's going to give him a lot of versatility with the Detroit Lions. Tyler Steen, an underrated offensive lineman who is more than athletic enough to play left tackle. He can play right tackle. Some teams will even project him inside to offensive guard. Brian Young, this kid was an end. They moved him into 5 technique. I think we watched him down at the Senior Bowl.
Yep.
He did a great job as an inline pass rusher. Another just very good football player that may not be the athlete that tests at the combine, but when he gets on the field and puts that helmet and shoulder pads on, there's not a lot of people that can block him. And finally, Jordan Battle, another limited athlete, you'd say, but because of his smarts and his savvy, he's always in position to make plays. And every time you put an Alabama tape on, a defensive tape on, you notice him, not because of his athleticism, because of his smarts and savvy for the position. That's why he's always in the mix on everything they do on the defensive side of the ball.
And because I don't want to give him short shrift, tight end Cameron Latu went at the very end
of
day 3 to San Francisco. So yet another Alabama player. And if you're keeping score, they're beating Georgia in that respect.
Yeah.
More Georgia kids, more Alabama players drafted than Georgia players. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Those were our winners. We're going to come back and talk about teams that were and players who maybe didn't have quite the first 2 days that they went like. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.